Yeah, I agree. And if, I mean, again, assuming that you have the wind or you have the nice, gentle slope to go down, if for some reason you can't get them seated, you can at least have them get their arms behind the spreader bars. That's something that I've always had problems with. I used to have my passengers get behind the spreader bars and get seated in their harness after you launch, but then they can never find the spreader bars because they're pushing them too far forward. You have them kind of cross their arms, in front of them so that their shoulders are pulled in a little bit. It's real easy for them to put their arms behind the spreader bars, either while they're launching or when you get them in the air. And then once they're in that position, it's relatively easy to kind of push off them to get yourself into the harness, at the same time getting them into the harness. If you kind of kick them at the lower part of the passenger harness, kind of down near their butt. So yeah, there's a couple of different launch techniques for you. The comment about the being dragged, about having the passenger being dragged. I think one of the things that a lot of pilots do wrong when they're launching Tandem is, hey Murray, you on the line with us?
Yes, hi guys, hi.
How you doing, buddy?
Fine, just had the customer in for the last hour or so I've been sort of trying to catch an ear while working.
Cool.
But she was young and pretty, so I have a good excuse.
Oh, well. Why are you calling us?
Left.
Okay.
We've got 3 left and then how to use word processors at the same time, so that'll save a lot of hours. Yeah, Tandem work. I've got to agree with David, if you can get them seated, it's a big plus. It makes it much easier if you've got that wind there, they're just floating about, particularly for the first time pilots, because it gives them that couple of minutes feeling of flying, yet they're only sort of feet or 6 inches off the ground. It really builds up the confidence. One of the things that we do on the launch for the Tandem is we start off with them actually in an uncomfortable position, in that their arms are in front rather than behind spreader bars. Now this we find is a very good thing because it's good for teaching the thought processes, the mythology behind safe piloting. So the first thing I ask them is, are they left or right-handed?
Okay.
Now, everybody sort of pauses and they go, why are you asking that when we're about to fly? Well, the thing is, if you're a right-handed person and you are going to fall over slightly or stumble, the tendency is to put your right hand out. So if you're right-handed, we get them to put their right hand across to the left shoulder strap, and then put the left hand across to the right shoulder strap, and that would delay any tendency for them to put out their hand, and particularly to grab the risers.
That's a good idea.
That reduces a lot of problems. They're in a padded harness, got a helmet on, they may even have gloves on, depending, because yes, Scotland is warm at times, so we don't always need gloves. And while it's slightly uncomfortable in the initial bit, it keeps their shoulders clear of the spreader bars. So while it's less comfortable for an initial flight, if you were to take off immediately, it's much more comfortable on the launch.
Right.
The next thing we've done, and this is before we're actually attached to the glider, is get them used to the idea that if you try and put your hand back under the spreaders, that's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put your elbow back,
right,
your hand follows, and that comes round easily, they can then hold onto the spreader bars, and as David said, if they can sit there floating, looks impressive, you're sort of holding them up. It gets them very comfortable into the seat, and it introduces them from the very first bit of paragliding to the idea that we're not just looking at what we do, but the secondary effects. In other words, if you stumble or if you'd be inclined to reach out, if you have your right hand under the left hand, you're not going to cause an accident.
Right. That's a pretty interesting point. I never thought of it quite that way.
Well, as you know, I haul everything apart and look at everything and review it.
Right. No, absolutely. It's a good recommendation. Yeah, I mean, you're basically keeping their strong arm contained.
Yeah, the dominant hand, the one that would tend to reach out and grab a riser, which is the very thing you don't want people to do, but they've spent 20, 30 years, however old they are,
right,
naturally reaching out for things. So if they're going to fall over or stumble, they'll reach out and what's in front of them. Well, if you're reverse launching, what's in front of them is the risers,
Right.
the very thing you don't want them to be reaching for.
Mm-hmm.
So this builds in a physical restriction to stop a psychologically induced physical problem, i.e. your passenger reaching out and grabbing a riser.
Good recommendation, Mark.
Murray, I have a question for you. In Scotland, is the federal authority in Scotland allow
the Civil Aviation Authority?
The Civil Aviation Authority allow tandem flying under an exemption, much like ours, or how is
it's essentially deregulated? As with all training flights in the UK, for tandem flying, the legal requirement would be if there's any payment made, it must be a training flight. Now that's why if you go down to your local flying club and want to go for a flight in a Cessna 152, you're actually legally taking a flying lesson, because otherwise it wouldn't be legal. So if you're doing any instruction flying with tandem, it must be for the purpose of instruction. Pure pleasure flight is not allowed. Now, having said that, most of the tandem flying of that nature in the UK is actually in breach, at least in reality, shall we say. Not that anybody would worry, but in practical terms, it is actually in breach of the law. But we use tandem purely as a training tool. Young Daniel, at 6 when he started, he was on the controls and he was learning. It was literally a training flight. And of course, Gabriel's met Aaron, and he'll probably be able to tell you what he thought of Aaron's standard of knowledge when he was 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it, just because we got you on the subject, do they have a way of separating or distinguishing what would be considered a training flight and what wouldn't be? I mean, do you have a certain set of things that you would have to do in order for it to be a training flight? Let the passenger fly, or explain to them, you know?
Well, my interpretation of it, and I interpret the Air Navigation Order to its strictest. So in other words, I will interpret it beyond what may actually be a legal requirement. I will look at anything that's written in there as being a legal requirement, even if it's only a moral one.
Right.
In other words, we don't use illegal 2-meter radios. So we interpret it very strictly, and basically we insist that even if somebody's only coming out for literally, they're probably never going to do it again, they just want to experience a flight, we treat it as a serious training flight, because so many people that might want to do that go, wow, at the end of 1 hour flying on a 35-foot high grass bank, when they spend 50 minutes on the control, that they come back. So you want to make sure they have safe regression. You want to make sure that their first experience, every single step, is going through the secondary effects, the risks of unsafe regression, consequences. In other words, if you do something, it may not matter in itself, but it increases the risk of something else happening. So we treat the whole thing very much as training.
And is that how you've gotten a percentage of your students? Do you have a lot of people sign up after they take tandem flights?
Well, yeah, mostly we're using tandem flights for folks that are interested, because we spend a lot of time talking them through and mentioning, well, the death rate in the UK last year was 1 in 1,000 of the main membership. But when you look at it, you probably only find that 2/3 of the main membership are really active pilots, and the average is probably only 10 hours flying. I mean, there's one of the main Scottish clubs where the coaches, if you add up all the coaches' hours, if you add up all the coaches' years, you come out with an average of 25 hours flying a year. There's one lady coach in Scotland who averages 4 hours 15 minutes flying a year, and she's coaching.
Wow. Wow.
So, I mean, when you consider that last year I did 332 hours, and most of our members, when they started training with us within 6 months, are on 25 hours, and they're aiming to fly about 100 hours a year. Yeah, it's a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Murray, we got to take a break. You gonna hang out with us?
Hang on.
Okay, we're going to be right back with you. Just a moment. This is the Paragliding Radio Talk Show. All right, you're listening to the Paragliding Radio Talk Show with your hosts, David, Gabriel, and Murray. We're going to be right back with you for the final segment of the show today. We're going to probably finish up talking about tandem flying and tandem launching, so stay tuned. We'll be right back with you in just a moment. All right, you're back. We're back. This is the Paragliding Radio Talk Show. Are you still on the line with us, Murray?
Yeah, if we can just go over one quick thing before we move on to different techniques.
Sure.
We had some folks out the other week. It was a chap from Italy with about 5 or 6 of his friends who were all quite interested. Only he had a short flight and a couple of Scottish girls that were out with him, and one of them was very keen on starting, and she actually phoned her pal to drive from Dundee to the site we were at, which was Victoria Park. And they're both hoping to sort of take it up this summer. Anyway, the Italian guy was used to seeing lots of tandem paragliding back home, although he'd never flown before. Now, not even at the end of Victoria Park where you were flying, but at the other end, where it's an even smaller slope, the guy could not believe that it would be possible to launch a tandem from there, and the wind at that time was only about 2 knots.
Yeah.
And after the flight, he was just shaking his head with disbelief, because every tandem launch he'd ever seen, there was a noticeable surge and dive after the pilots ran off the hill. And when we launch, we make the wing fly up. We don't drag it up.
Yeah.
There's very limited top, just maybe about 4 or 5 feet longer top area than there is actually the length with the line. But because the wing was eased up, let to settle, doing my famous double bounce, and then surged up, so the wing was actually flying, and then we just eased on the speed, it meant it was virtually no dive, because by the time we left the top, the wing was fractionally ahead, and its lift was providing the same thrust as it does when it's in the air.
Right.
Gentle glide down at 15-20 feet, spot land next to the wee car park, and he just couldn't believe it. He said, they see them diving when they launch off mountains.
That's actually, that was one of the next things I wanted to bring up was in the actual launching technique, because as we were talking about a little bit at the beginning of the conversation with the tandems where you have passengers being launched and how to avoid this, and it occurred to me that most pilots launch their tandem like they launch their solo, which is they yank real hard on the A's.
Well, I launch my tandem exactly the same way as I launch my solo, which is
so
never.
do I.
I virtually never launch a paraglider, no matter what the conditions. I virtually never launch a paraglider in one move, bringing it up. I ease it up, maybe keeping the trailing edge just touching, to pressurize the wing. I then let it settle, just like the article in Paraglider magazine, The Lazy Pilot. This is how to launch it and be lazy. And keeping that energy in, I then make the wing fly up. So it's already producing thrust as the trailing edge leaves the ground, and as I go back uphill and downwind, under the wing, letting it come up. And then on a cam, I pick up my speed, reversing it and start going forward, even if I'm facing backwards, out from the hill, but with the wing fully flying, make it do the work.
We got another caller on the line here, Murray, so hang on just a moment. Keith, are you with us also? Keith? No, maybe not. Looks like...
Hello.
Okay.
Hi, Keith. How you doing? This is David.
Hey, guys. Doing good. Hey, Gabe, I'm not sure about the connection, but you guys have talked a lot about site protocol and the idea that visiting pilots should, take a lot of responsibility for communicating and getting waivers and things.
Right.
Could you also kind of talk about the responsibility of clubs, having waivers available, having the guys carry them in the vehicles, things like that?
That's a good point. I usually just take that assumption to be true, because whenever somebody comes to Tory, we've got 500 copies of waivers that need to be signed, and that's the one thing we don't run out of stock on. But it's going to be real hard for you to make sure that you sign all the waivers and do that kind of thing if nobody around you has them.
Yeah. One thing we noticed, trying to plan trips and things is, a lot of the websites have a section, called Site Guide or whatever. Usually they say, well, find a local pilot, sign a landowner waiver, things like that. But when you finally get to the site, if it's on Monday morning or something like that, there's nobody around.
One of the things that we're trying to do to address that in Scotland is that we actually have set up an email address, which is buddyfly@ and then our website, and that forwards to half a dozen different recipients, so that the one email sent out, whoever can pick it up will pick it up and respond, and they will then act as the local contact to the visiting pilot. so that we can try and sort of keep in touch. But it means that anybody visiting only needs to send one email to one email address, and they've got a good chance of somebody getting back in touch with them.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, in agreeing with you, Keith, I think that if a club is going to advertise a site, but then advertise that there's, a waiver requirement, then it's their responsibility to make the waivers, accessible to anybody that would want to come visit. Having said that, I've been put in that position a lot of times where I've shown up at sites and I've tried to do the responsible thing and call people beforehand or establish contact with somebody, and there just hasn't been anybody there.
Yeah, Catch-22 might be a great aviation film, but it's not the sort of thing that you want in aviation, certainly not in paragliding.
Yep, definitely. Again, it just kind of goes from the experience about showing up at a site in the morning or whatever, trying to do what's right, like you were saying, contacting people by email. The sites have email contacts and they're all expired, or the addresses are wrong. I've even gone to the point of saying, can you PDF me the waivers ahead of time?
Right.
I'll fill them out, pay the fees, and send them back.
Sure. And is that what's worked out for you? I mean, in terms of just generally overcoming this, or?
Well, generally the problem is nobody has them in PDF form, or there's the landowner has 6 of them, on his dresser at home, but the club doesn't actually have any of them.
Yeah, well, I don't understand. These people have to type them out at some point or another.
It's so easy to put on their website. You just put in the link in the file and you can download the PDF.
You know what might be interesting is if we had something like Yushka, because Yushka they insure so many sites. I think if Yushka were to insure a site, they should also make on their website available any of the documentation that needs to be completed or any of the protocol that needs to be followed before attending the site.
Keith, I was just thinking, even if you did nothing more than just send them a signed copy of the USHA waiver, which is a third-party liability waiver that protects them and their property, that would certainly be a help. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, definitely. But that was just kind of my comments for the day. It would be nice to, the sites that require you to do something, if they would make it a little more easy to comply with those requirements.
Absolutely. At Marshall, they have a basically like an envelope box. They have envelopes and they have the waiver. You fill out the waiver, you put $5 in the envelope, and you drop it in the drop box, and that's good enough. And somebody comes out and collects it once a week. At Torrey, we always have somebody there, on hand. But I think if more sites could do kind of what they do at Lakes, where they call them the metal rangers or whatever, where you just fill out the paper and drop it into the metal attendant. That would be cheap and simple and probably accomplish what we're trying to do.
Keith, may I ask you a question before you hang up?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about some of the flying sites that you have in Michigan. I don't know too much about that area, but I'd love to hear a little more about it.
The flying here is pretty much along the west shore of Lake Michigan. As far as coastal sites, we do some inland towing, obviously, but most of the soaring is very similar to Torrey Pines, where we have sites that are 370-foot high sand dune that is fairly steep, and we get hours of bridge soaring.
I know the feeling.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then
lazy flying.
Yeah. The rest of the lakeshore that isn't that high is maybe kind of like what Murray's doing. That's maybe 50 to 70 feet high.
So we fly 1,000-foot high ones as well. We've got whole range.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's similar to Torrey, other than the landing zone is a little more tame because there's 100 foot of beach to land on, pretty much 300 miles of it. Unfortunately, we don't have the consistency that you have. Our best flying is kind of starts in September through November, where the winds are consistent off the lake.
But that in a way, that's good, because that's when most other sites tend to be not so consistent.
Yeah. So we travel during the summer when the winds are dead, and visit other sites and go to the mountain. We've been to Baja a few times down in La Salina.
Cool.
Well, on that site, we've been to Torrey, although it was too windy to fly when we were there. We've been out to that area. We're heading up to Columbia, British Columbia, just before the Nationals to do some flying there.
Are you going to be up there? What is that? May or June?
Yeah, we're going to be there May 28th through June 6th, and the Nationals start on the 6th.
Yeah, very good.
Well, hopefully you'll phone in and give the show some reports on what's happening at the Nationals as well.
We're not going to stay there for the Nationals, but I'll let you know who shows up beforehand.
Encourage more people to phone in as well. Get a lot more pilots from all areas of the US and, of course, Europe as well. The more listeners that phone in, the better.
Keith, they're going to have flying up in Southern Oregon from I think it's the 27th till the 5th or the 6th. They've got a flying, and they have a competition the week after. Are you going to be driving, or are you flying out to BC?
We're going to fly into Kelowna and drive over Columbia, so it's right near Vernon.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of be up in that area right off the get-go.
Huh.
But this kind of conversation kind of inspired from trying to plan this trip and get waivers signed. There's a lot of sites there and a lot of landowners who require waivers, and I've sent the emails and got a couple of replies that pretty much were, well, hope to see you soon and have a good time while you're here.
But
my emails are pretty exact. I'm like, can you send me waivers?
Yeah.
Can I sign up ahead of time? Otherwise, you might spend a couple of days just trying to satisfy the site protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if nothing else, if you email me, we've got a lot of waivers at Torrey. I'll send you those, and you can copy them and send those off to the landowners if you can't find anybody from the club to represent.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll help you out.
All right, great.
All right.
Enjoyed your call, Keith, and good flying, and appreciate your listenership.
Yeah, the show is great. We listen to the archives any chance we miss a show, and pretty much the whole club here that's into paragliding and catches the show whether at work with the headphones on. So
well, hopefully get more of them phoning in as well.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
So I think that's running us out of time, actually. So, Murray, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you again here pretty soon.
And we'll catch other techniques at a later time.
Yeah, we'll do that next week.
All the best to everybody in the States and Europe.
Thank you very much. And the same from us. All the best to everybody. Guys, fly safe. Have a good flying week. We'll be back here same time, same place next week.
See what happens. Aye.